Okay, welcome back. We are diving into Constellation, episode 4, titled The Left Hand of God, written by Peter Harness, directed by Oliver Hirschspiegel, same writer and director as a couple of episodes that we talked about last week. I have about, Cameron, have about 9,000 words here as a summary of this episode, but I'm going to try to truncate it as much as possible.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah. We don't need a play-by-play.
yeah. Uh, Joe, our main character, Joe, her life is, I mean, just falling apart because there are things she doesn't remember about her marriage. There are things that happened before from when she was in space with affairs between her husband, her daughter can't remember her Swedish. Joe all of a sudden knows how to play the piano. She didn't know how to do that, but thinks she knew how to do that before. So things are just completely in chaos as she tries to sort out what's going on here. She eventually goes to some counseling, and they prescribe her lithium pills, which she understands is an antipsychotic. But through some investigation, she learns that these lithium pills that she's been prescribed that she does not want to take because she does not want to think that she is crazy in any way is the same thing that she has been prescribed as daily pills to take when she got back from this trip. She does some investigating, learning that there are a small number of astronauts that have experienced these similar things that she has, and they have been categorized and tried to be, I don't know, tried to be put back on the right path by these pills and by some of these things that they're doing. She confronts Henry Caldera about this, and he explains that there's a phenomenon called the left hand of God that some of these astronauts have experienced to fly in very high altitudes. Um, None of this seems to help because the home life continues to deteriorate. Her husband Magnus thinks that she needs to go into a facility that can help her recover. They argue and fight over this. Joe knocks Magnus down. We don't see him get back up. We don't know his fate. But what we do know is that some marine observatory in Denmark sent Joe a package with transcripts and recordings of the lost conversations when she was in space and of conversations seemingly from a female cosmonaut that might have been the one that died that Joe saw in space. The cabin scenes in this episode are with Magnus and Alice, different from the first 3 episodes that were with Joe and Alice. All that leads toward this ending of a very ominous painting that exists in their cabin in the woods. We got a heavy dose of quantum physics in this one. We got a heavy dose of are we in different realities, different timelines, different universes? With all of that, where should we go?
Yeah, indeed, because you didn't hit on everything. You hardly talked about Henry or
Yeah,
Bud. Kind of a lot here. Then let's start with the opening scene, insofar as it seemed clear to me that this is an alternate reality. I mean,
yeah.
of course, that already seemed fairly clear through the first 3 episodes, but if you think about the fact that we're getting an opening scene where Magnus is taking Alice to the cabin, and at the end he tells her something like, "Don't worry, you're never going to see her again," presumably referring to Joe. Um, there's no way that's in the same world as the other cabin scenes, at least.
Yeah, can't be, and it does harken back to some of our conversations from last week of, are we being fed this information that there's a timeline where Joe died
Yeah.
and has not come back, and then there's a timeline where maybe the Joe that was supposed to die actually ended up in another timeline. I know I'm going off a tangent already here, but just sort of how did you read the fact that there are now two sets of cabin scenes?
Well, what I find particularly interesting as a question here is that for the most part, other than this opening scene and scenes where too much. Step back. Okay. For the most part, we've been within Joe's perspective
Mhm.
in this show. And um, if called for, we could refer to her as our Joe, right?
Hmm.
Because apparently there were other ones, right? There are strong indications in this episode that our Joe has taken the place of a Joe who didn't die in space. I don't know exactly how to put this together. Um, if that gets at it. But regardless, mostly it's been from her perspective, at least when she's around. But when she's not around, you know, um, in this opening scene, it's clearly an alternate reality from the opening cabin scenes in previous episodes. And then I start wondering, well, how many worlds are we seeing in the other scenes in this show? Um, Perhaps in particular the ones that Joe isn't in. You following me
Yeah,
here?
that's one of my essential questions as well. Is that I take it as the opening scene with Magnus and Alice in the cabin is clearly separate from our call our prime timeline, the one that we were introduced to with Joe. Some version of Joe is alive. It's not the one that maybe she's supposed to be in. It's sort of our prime timeline that we're following. I think my impression is that we are introduced to Magnus and Alice in at least a secondary timeline, but which may not be the only one, right? Because we're introduced to some things later that
Yeah.
that others that might exist. And again, these are yeah, and I think that's part of my confusion here is there are these timelines, are these universes, are these realities, are they all the same? Is that all mean the same thing? What are we being introduced to here? I think this concept of, again, they keep going back to explaining these experiments, what it looks like, and what that means for matter in two places at the same point. Just sort of what exactly are we dealing with here, and does that matter?
Yeah, I mean, well, narratively, it matters insofar as there's a question of how this is going to hang together and how we understand it. Whether it's like again, as I said last week, I'm just going to keep saying when this comes up about quantum mechanics, I don't care if they're getting the science right because they aren't.
Yeah,
Like at some level, they aren't. I mean, I know just enough to know that if you really, got some quantum physicists in the conversation, they could poke holes and, have
yeah.
complaints and all of that. But I think they are pretty clearly playing on what's called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, as others have in fiction as well, and taking that at a macro level that there are potentially infinite versions
Mm,
of reality, which you could also approach just at the level of kind of philosophical thought experiment.
yeah.
Like potentially at any given moment, you're making a choice. You could have made another choice, and so you could split that off into an infinite number of realities if you take the line that there is a reality in which every possible choice is made.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if they're quite going that far,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
it does seem clear they're playing with that kind of many worlds thing. And then there's a strong suggestion that maybe the Cal device did something to kind of, I don't know, puncture the barriers between the realities. Um,
I'm glad you brought this up because it and I don't know necessarily how far we're going to go down this one specific path at this point, but it confused me that so we see Joe, she's in the European Space Agency offices, she's looking at the medical records, she's dissecting the
mm,
pills to see what's in them. She sees this version of Henry, whatever version that is, and whatever it is that he's supposed to be trying to convey to her. And then she goes into this office, but she's in an office while men are trying to clean it out. And
yeah,
so it sort of talks about to what you're referencing there. This barrier might be sort of flimsy right then of where she is versus where she's supposed to be, or the other version of where she's supposed to be. Because these men are there cleaning out an office because in that timeline or in that universe, she has died. Okay.
right.
And that makes sense to me, right? Because she's experienced this left hand of God. She has gone through this experience. Something has happened to her. But then I can justify that. But then I can't justify why is someone like Alice seeing things, or is the barrier that's sort of become transparent now something where everyone is exposed to that. Everyone can sort of see between these realities. How can Alice see a version where her mother has died, Paul has not, other people are there in her house? I just couldn't, I guess, square that circle, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because with regard to Joe, I mentioned the Cal device, but it does seem like there's something broader that maybe
Hmm.
pre-exists the Cal device with Henry, perhaps Irina, perhaps some of these other people she finds in the records, other people Henry mentions when he's talking about the left hand of God. And I liked how he mentioned Laika. This is the dog the Russians sent into space.
Yes.
um, and he has a whiteboard, right? And one of the things on the whiteboard is death in space.
Death in space. Yep.
The other one I think is like stress trauma or something. And then for some reason he circled Lithium 7. Okay. That's interesting to think about because it, it kind of seems like Lithium 7 is a treatment for the condition that they're giving people. But then how does it fit on the whiteboard where it would seem like the whiteboard is speculating about the cause?
Yeah, this is one of my off the wall conspiracy theories, is that someone or something is behind some sort of mission to propagate or push forward this being able to go between worlds or realities or timelines. And the lithium helps them do that. It doesn't ground them, it doesn't bring them back to reality, but that actually pushes things forward because of what they've been exposed to, right? It's just a random
Mm,
thought, but it could be.
that's an interesting possibility. That would actually fit a lot better with Henry's whiteboard.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, maybe death in space is the initial cause.
Mhm.
One version of you dies in space,
Yeah,
or something like this, and you end up somehow, though, taking the place of a version of you who did not die in space. And that's interesting. The suggestion
yeah.
that the lithium is intended to.
But that also could come back to your question of a choice or a decision or something that had to have been determined. One one side of the choice led to death, one did not. And so is someone or something or someone trying to get back to a moment where, we see a sort of trope all the time. Oh, if I could only get back and change things, I could get back to what I had before, or the life I had before. Does something happen to someone? It's Irina, the female cosmonaut. If it's someone else, I'm trying to find the way to get back to the life I had before.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to those scenes with Joe
Mhm.
struggling to fix the pod and all of that, if you think about how all of that played out, she died.
Yeah, yeah,
That's where I'm landing at this point. Right? Our Joe
yes,
was trying to, you know, um, fix the pod. There were multiple indications that she didn't really have enough time. Then the latches malfunctioned, and
mhm,
so on and so forth. And then we saw her like, oh, she finally did it, and
yeah,
got through. So I think my theory here is that somewhere in there, our Joe did manage to get back to Earth, but it jumped universes, jumped realities, um, somewhere in there. And I mean, actually, the strongest scene that suggests itself is when she's back on Earth, though, when she's in the helicopter. If you recall that scene,
yeah.
where
And
it's
things
like,
are, yeah, reality is sort of jumping back and forth in there. Yep.
so I don't know. Hopefully, there's going to be more information in the back half of the season here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's an
to
important point to bring out. We're halfway done with this season already, right?
Apparently, yeah, that's 8 episode season. We're halfway there.
Yeah.
And are there going to be more seasons after this? I don't know. Is there going to be space for more seasons? We don't know. Well, personally, we haven't watched the whole season yet, so
Yeah.
um,
So with all the
maybe.
questions that exist, there were, I thought, quite a few answers given in this episode.
Yeah,
The idea of multiple astronauts going through this, the idea of what the pills are, so several things that seems like We got this recordings of what might have happened to the cosmonaut. We got some real exposition about the experiment. It the right amount of information flowing through this episode, like giving too much away, giving too much through what we need to know versus what needs to remain a mystery at this point. Like a lot of stuff, we know what the pills are. We know
Yeah.
what the cosmonaut said. We know what the experiment does. We know what has been observed. We know potentially that there's a reality where Joe died and where she didn't. Or sort of, do we did we get the right amount of information here, or there's just so much we have to do that we have to make sure we're giving, trickling some of it out each episode.
I mean, I liked it, presuming we can trust the creators of the show to have enough going on in the next four episodes at least, to close out one solid season. And then who knows, probably they want to do more than that. Generally people do, but maybe not. With the lithium, I kind of like, I mean, it's interesting to me that it's lithium,
Yeah.
for one thing. I was kind of surprised that they were telling us so immediately what the pills were,
Yes. Me
right?
too.
Because we talked about that at some length last week. But to take that latter point first, I kind of like that, because they're not holding these pills up as some great mystery that's going to be central to, but rather like, no, it's just lithium. And the fact that it's lithium, that is a completely existing thing in the world that people do and take, they take it. Lithium 7, I was doing a little research. Apparently, it's like the most abundant isotope of lithium on Earth.
Okay.
So it's like this isn't some rare, weird thing. Um, Not really,
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of that. It actually does create another question around it because it is a common element, as it were. Um, The other stuff, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's still a whole lot of questions here. It does seem
Yeah.
strongly indicated that the one version of Joe died, you know. But related to that, I think your question is a very good one that the show owes us an answer to.
Yeah.
How is Alice seeing the memorial
Yeah.
for the dead Joe, where Paul is there? By the way, Paul didn't die.
Right.
So that's a wrinkle in what I said earlier, because our Joe's Paul died, right? So I don't know. Maybe I was wrong before.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm glad you brought that up because that to me could introduce an idea of even a third reality, a third timeline, because what we're just discussing is Joe dies long after Paul did and everything that we've seen, right? If we assume it's while she's trying to repair the
Right.
escape capsule, while she's trying to land on Earth, and something in that capacity, she dies. But that's a day or two after Paul died. And yet we see a reality where Joe is dead, but Paul is at the funeral. So, yeah, again, even beyond how Alice can see that, does that then introduce another reality that we have to sort of bake into this equation here?
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned many worlds theory before. I mean, one possibility is that Constellation will conceptually go that far
Hmm.
as a way to not have to count the number of realities. You following me here?
Yeah, yeah,
Like if the conceptual answer is it's infinite,
yeah. It doesn't matter.
well,
Yeah,
then we don't need to actually like count so much as, and try to figure out how the narrative hangs together or what have you. But yeah, it is a real question about Alice because there are, I think, indications. If we think about Henry's whiteboard again, we think about some of the stuff that Bud said about Apollo 18. We think about the dead cosmonaut in space being Irina, who we've
mm,
also seen alive on Earth. One of the things on his whiteboard is death in space. So, like, one possibility would be that, okay, there are infinite versions of all of us, but if one of those versions of you dies in space, weird stuff happens.
yeah,
Not really like scientifically plausible, but maybe that's one possibility of where we're going, right? One version of you died in space, and that short circuits your experience of metaphysical reality in some way, and now you're kind of in between, living in this liminal space between worlds. I don't know, but Alice didn't die in space.
Exactly. And that's why, there's also what's sort of the common sci-fi trope of we tried to take two steps, but we actually got 100 out of it. Like we opened up a box that we shouldn't have. We, invented Skynet to protect us, and then it ends up destroying us, right? So this idea that you're trying to just accomplish one thing, something, find one piece of matter that's in two states at the same time, and you end up opening a door to an infinite number of ways that matter can exist.
Yeah. See, now, but I do think at this point that the primary phenomenon here pre-exists the Cal device. And Henry's trying to figure it out with the Cal device or something like that. Of everything we've seen, then it continues to feel to me like the stuff we see between the stuff with Henry, the stuff with Bud, thinking about whether they're versions of the same person or what have you, almost feels like that has the potential to be the most fruitful space where we're going to start getting some answers.
Yeah.
And we get more here because Henry is talking to, I don't know, himself on a computer, or it's Jonathan Banks wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Is that Bud? Is that a third one? How
Mm-hmm.
many, how many are there? And so on. What did you
Yeah,
think on that?
I think we're might be knocking on the door of not what the right answer is, but sort of what they're going towards, which is that we have no concept of how many paths they've opened up to different realities or universes. And is it just three? Well, what would be the reason why it would be just three? Why is it not just this infinite number? And that is you're trying to get something to get you to the one where you were before. It's a fruitless effort because you're just going to find yourself in another one that has, that you don't belong in or that you weren't a part of before.
Yeah. But see, also, if we're down this path with Henry, there seems to be the possibility that what happened after Apollo 18 is multiple versions of him ended up in the same reality. That would be different than what happened to Joe,
Yeah.
right? I think, unless not, maybe there is another Joe in our primary reality somewhere or
Yeah.
something like that. If that's right about Henry, though, and Bud, it might also be the case with Irina. So I want to call your attention and our listeners' attention to the scene
Mhm.
from episode 2, where they are trying to communicate with Joe on the ISS. And this is the point where the communication fails and they can no longer hear her.
Mhm.
All right. As that's going on, someone, maybe it's Michaela, maybe it's someone else, like Henry assistant of some kind, comes and informs him that he has a phone call from Skagerak Marine Observatory.
Yes.
And Irina makes a face at that. Like, Skagerak? And he's like, don't give me any, don't give me a hard time or whatever. That's how it plays. I think it's more facial expressions than anything. And then he asks her how her sister's doing.
Hmm.
She says, I think she's dead, something like that. And then she asks him about his brother. He says, we haven't spoken in years, thank God. And then we cut to Bud.
Yeah.
And there is nothing in there to tell us whether he took the call from Skagerak.
Correct.
Okay. But here in episode 4, Joe gets the package in the mail with the cassette tapes from Skagerak Marine Observatory.
Hmm.
And the one cassette tape of her from October 15th is from the day, and presumably more precisely the time I was referring to there in episode 2.
Yeah.
So it seems to indicate to me that Henry did not take that call. And if he had, they could have heard her because Skagerak was hearing her.
Yeah, I like that theory because what what I think my initial surface level observation of that was, oh, there's somebody who knows what's going on, and they are, uh, they sort of want to be the fly in the ointment of this whole thing, and here's the what can expose, the grand conspiracy of what's happening. But it does seem like there's sort of a deeper thing where all of this is connected back to what happened to Henry, what happened to Irina, what happened to their versions of themselves that whatever it is that they went through. I guess, and I also want to ask you this related to that same point. So we sort of see this series of astronauts, Henry, Joe, the one who saw the angels, the one that attacked their family, these people that have had these issues, but there's nothing in there about an Irina. Is that because she is Russian? She's a cosmonaut, that records wouldn't be in there, or some other explanation when she's looking through the records. I just took it as, well, Russian cosmonaut records wouldn't be in this data set or whatever.
I might have to revisit that. You mean when she's looking at the records? In my memory, I feel like I remember seeing Irina's name in there, but
I may
maybe
have
I did that.
yeah, maybe I
Maybe I just expected
completely
it to be in
yeah,
there.
because I only remember the one who saw angels and the one who attacked their family. Um, Again, that's a point we're gonna have to check before before next time, I guess. But
Yeah, well, I'll call it up and double check that because I mean, it would only have been visually
yeah,
on the list, not something that was further, elaborated on.
right.
Um, but I try to look back at that because you're right. If she's not there, that might also be interesting to note.
Hmm.
These other people who are there, who are on categorized as B,
B,
you
yeah.
know, presumably they're all being given lithium instead of B vitamins. Also, are they going to enter our story in any way? Like, are we going to actually see them? Is Joe going to look them up? These are possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah, I like
Um,
the theory that they start appearing in some way throughout this story.
but then Skagerak, look, I mean, in terms of part of what you were saying, there are strong indications that they are, I don't know what, on the other side in one way or another, because well, Irina scoffs at their name in episode 2, but also, maybe even more importantly, they've sent her a tape of a Russian cosmonaut dying in space in 1967, who
Exactly.
was a woman.
Exactly.
And throughout the hearing, everyone insisted no Russian cosmonauts ever died in space.
Yeah.
Ever. Could
Yeah.
not possibly be the explanation.
We've
Must
opened
have
up
been a
all
trash
the
bag.
confidential records. We can show you. No one is, we promise you, these are all the records. No one died in space.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe Skagerak's been out there and they have recordings from what Denmark's some special ability to record space. I don't know. And maybe they have recordings of various things, and the international community at large doesn't give them credence, right? So
Yeah.
Henry's not going to take their call because you can't give any credibility to this organization that's out there saying, hey, we have a tape of Irina dying in space. And everyone would go, are you insane? She's right there, alive, right?
Yeah.
So, how they're going to factor into this is interesting. And they planted the seed in episode 2. It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
I look
To bring
back
it
at
back
my,
was to bring it back was interesting. A have no doubt that this is not a marine observatory, and B have no doubt this is not in Denmark. So what they actually are, we're gonna find out.
yeah, well, we'll see. Also doing research, you can read my recap as well if people have been writing on each episode, and there's some of these details in there. Um, the first man to die on a space flight was a Russian cosmonaut.
Hmm.
Um,
Good pull there because yeah, I sort of like the that juxtaposition of there's the reality that happened, and there's the things that they say never happened on this show.
Yeah.
They talk about Apollo 18, Russian cosmonauts never dying, all these different things that we can point to that are discrepancies. And is that just because this is a piece of fiction, or is it because we are now on sort of a a really thin barrier between different realities?
Right. Yeah. So clearly, I mean, like you could just say, well, the primary world of this story is not the world that we're living in right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's clearly a lot going on here to think about, and I do think that's a big question about Alice. I'm glad you mentioned that
Yeah.
because she very clearly sees and has a sense of something being off with her mother even
Yeah.
before that. Um, what's going on there? And you want to talk about the painting a little bit? You noted the title here.
Yeah, so just want to get your thoughts and if there's anything you can draw from me what this is. All this episode ends again in the cabin, just a pan shot towards this painting. It's a painting by Hugo Simberg from 1897. It's called The Poor Devil by the Fire, The Devil by the Pot. And there's all sorts of speculation online what what this could mean and why we're seeing this. Sort of see
So
what you think about it.
my first question, Ryan, and this may not be of interest to anyone listening. Where did you learn that this was what the painting was?
This is just sleuthing online, just trying to find has anyone found out where this was. I certainly didn't know it ahead of time, but there's some
But it
Reddit
was
different
people were
things.
talking about Constellation, and you
Yes,
directly,
yes,
yeah, okay.
yes.
Because I tried to figure out what the painting was before the episode aired, and I came up short.
Yeah.
I
No,
took a screenshot of it. I put it in Google Lens. No.
it was only
Um,
by benefit of we were recording this 2 days after the episode aired.
yeah. So that's good. I put the screenshot in my recap, but I was like, I don't know what this is. So Hugo Simberg, looking into him a little bit, kind of an interesting figure. I did notice in relation to what we're talking about that perhaps his most famous painting is called The Wounded Angel,
Oh,
which
interesting.
was the
Okay.
title, I think, of episode 2 of Constellation.
Yes, that's right.
So are
Oh my
there
gosh. What if this whole theme is Hugo Simberg and sort of a retelling of his life? That would be the
we kind of
my doors.
do we get we probably should get an art historian on here and really dig into what's going on with Hugo Simberg's work.
Yeah.
Um, Devil by the Fire, Devil. I don't have a lot to say about this. I mean, I appreciate the painting personally.
Yeah. Yeah. My
Um,
favorite theory I saw online was this painting, which again we there's a screenshot of it in Cameron's piece. You can go find it online. Is that there's this sort of emasculated, almost bony, thin version of the devil standing holding a pot near a fire, and the theory is that sort of the devil is starving, and what they're doing with these experiments is feeding him. That this is just pure evil that we're opening the doors to by doing these experiments. So why that painting would be hung up in the cabins, who knows? I want some more, I don't know, happier things in my vacation homes, but to each their own, I guess.
yeah. Another question is, and look, one of the things I appreciated about this show is that it leads me to questions like this, even if I wish I'd actually done what I'm about to say before we recorded, which I didn't do. In the previous cabin scenes, was that painting there?
Yeah, I have no
You know,
idea.
I'm not sure. They really call our attention to it here. Um, but it's a possibility that maybe it was a different painting in the other
Yeah.
ones. I don't know. I'd have to double check, and I haven't done that. Unfortunately, I should have done that.
Each
Um,
reality has a Hugo Simberg painting in it in the cabin.
maybe, maybe
Who
the most
knows?
one's Francis Bacon. Totally different world. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
no other thoughts beyond that. There are interesting theories out there, and this seems like something that maybe we'll get a sense of why or where this painting is or what it means before we're done. But it's certainly I don't know. There are other mysteries I'd rather solve first.
yeah, maybe keep an eye on the paintings.
Yep,
Definitely worth noting here. And yeah, where's this all going to go? To what extent is it going to be playing with quantum mechanics? Clearly, it is. To what extent is it going to hop over into metaphysics of a
yep.
more spiritual nature? Like, is it going to be devil stuff and God stuff in here? It's possible.
Yeah.
You we'll see, but I don't know. I'm enjoying the show. I think there's a lot to dig into here, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk it all through with you here each week. And I hope people enjoy listening.
Yeah. I'm enjoying going through this. It's one of these where I have no concept of where we're going, but I like the journey that we're on. So we got at least four more to go. So looking forward to doing that.
Cool. So I think that about does it for this week. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
I think we've touched on what I need to.
All right, sounds good. So we'll be back next week, talk about Constellation episode 5. In the meantime, you can read my recap of this week's episode all on tvobsessive.com. Check out other stuff on there. Follow us on social media at TV Obsessive, on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Mastodon. I never check the Mastodon. And Threads. I've been posting articles on Threads. Basically, with those, you're just gonna get the articles posted there if you want to, you know, see it on your social media when we publish something and so on. Check out the YouTube channel, like and subscribe there, and all of that. And I think that about does it. So we'll be back next week for Constellation episode 5.
All right. Really looking forward to that. We will see you next time.